I'm Mark Wybrow, and this is the Electronic Cafe, the channel for the lovers of electronic music.
And I'm Andy McNabb, so let's get started. So welcome to this edition of the Electronic Cafe, and loads of good stuff been happening musically in the last few weeks. I'm sure a lot of you went to Record Store Day, as did Mark and I. We got up crazy early. I think I picked Mark up about 6:15, got to Rough Trade around about 7 o'clock, and the queue was already about 150 metres long. But we managed to get most of what we wanted. I'm particularly pleased that I got my copy of Exit North, which is the album with Steve Jansen from Japan involved. Great album, really loved that. And you know, bought a few albums I was really happy with. Hope you did the same as well. But you know, when you get home, you think, oh, maybe I should have got this, or there's a couple of other bits that I thought at the time, nah, I don't need that. Come the evening, I realised that there was a couple of Gorillaz albums that I wish I'd bought. Went to Rough Trade's website at 6 o'clock. It completely crashed. So I checked out the boys at Exile Records up in Scotland. Good bunch of guys. I was up in their store in Edinburgh last year and managed to get those albums. And in fact, they've still got some of the Record Store Day albums available. So if there's something you think you missed out on or you want to try and get still, check the boys out. I'll ask Mark to put a link up here for Exile Records in Edinburgh. So it's ASSAI. So great bunch of guys, and hopefully they'll get you the album you need. Also, big thanks to Mark for doing a great job on our last episode of the 1982 show, which is just looking at some of the great music of that year. So if you haven't seen it yet, go and check it out. I hope you enjoyed that. And also just a big thanks to our friend Vaughan George for being a guest contributor on our Hot Stuff section last week, talking about his passion for Violator, and what a great album. So that's it for me, an update. Now let's get into the incredible part 3, the resurrection of Mr. Gary Numan. So if you saw part 1 of our homage to Mr. Numan, we looked at the tracks that just made him get #1s on a regular basis, like this. Then in part 2, we looked at the start of what I call the kind of pants years, as I call them, where he's starting to decline after I Feel I Assassin, with tracks like this.
She likes film pictures too. A friend of mine, something new. She likes girls, lives my dreams, eats my face. She sits on the naked screen.
So now he really was at rock bottom. He was getting bashed by pretty much every critic. His fans were leaving him in droves. And you have to say, this probably would have finished most people off. But Numan, to his credit, and unbeknownst to him, was on the verge of a major comeback. So I'm really glad to say, let's look in part 3 at the resurrection of the mighty Gary Numan.
Let's put it all into perspective. Numan had written, recorded and toured 14 albums in a period 1978 to 1992. That's 14 years. No wonder after the initial period of success the wheels fell off. 14 studio albums in 14 years is a grueling and exhausting schedule by any standards. After the Machine and Soul album, Numan re-evaluated everything. After a decade struggling and 10 albums with diminishing returns, covered by us in the Electronic Cafe Gary Numan Part 2 episode, the penny finally dropped and his subsequent work went into a much more darker and industrial direction that would revive his career.
My career was in a real bad place in between 92 and 94, and my wife got me this album for the first time, and it changed everything for me. It's a fantastic album. It made me love music again. I didn't realise I'd sort of fallen out of love with it, and I hadn't enjoyed it for some time, and it was hearing this that made me realise somehow. And I went back to music with a different attitude after this album. It went back to being a hobby, something I did for the love of it, rather than thinking about radio and A&R men and all that stuff. Ever since I listened to this album, my music has been much heavier, much darker, and more inventive again. And if I follow it all back, it goes right back to this. Alan Wilder was in the band when this was made. He's now a really good friend of mine, so I regularly say thank you to him, because he, probably more than anything, this is the album that got me through that period, and is why I'm still around at the moment.
So, by 1994, Numan just decided to stop attempting to crack the pop market and concentrate instead on exploring more personal themes. I think his future wife Gemma was a massive impact on this, encouraging him to strip away the influences of the last few years that's seen that huge decline. So Numan re-evaluated his career and veered toward a harsher, more industrial direction, with the songwriter on the album Sacrificed. For the first time, he played all the instruments himself. The move was critically well received, as Numan's harder and darker sound emerged, just as bands that were influenced by Numan, such as 9 Inch Nails, were really starting to fly and become successful. The influence was two-way. Numan claims that 9 Inch Nails' song Closer is his favourite single of all time and influenced his music.
Numan admits that he was listening to the opinion of too many other so-called musical experts, and he wasn't releasing music which was true to himself. And, as Andy said, taking on board advice from his future wife Gemma and using Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion and 9 Inch Nails as its template, Numan re-evaluated everything and surfaced with Sacrifice, the album in 1994, often cited as marking the start of his critical and artistic rejuvenation. After bottoming out professionally and critically with the failed 1992 Machine and Soul album, Gary Numan officially began his comeback with Sacrifice in 1994, an album that found him for the first time in years perfectly in step with the zeitgeist and presents a huge musical and stylistic shift in Gary Numan's career. A dark, brooding, industrial-sounding album recorded at home with most instruments played by Numan himself and produced by Gary Numan. Straight away you know this album is different. It has a different feel, making the music that he wanted to make rather than to get onto the radio, which rejected everything he tried over the last 10 years. Again, the album covers the theme of religion and death and is a strong return following Numan's previous near-fatal career moves, and gives his fans a collective sigh of relief and proved he still has something left in the tank.
No absolution if you come for me. If you come for me.
So his next two studio albums, Exile released in 97 and Pure in 2000, were again well received, significantly starting to help restore his critical reputation, as did a tribute album called Random, which was released just before Exile, which featured people like Damon Albarn, Jesus Jones, who had all been influenced by Numan. Numan toured the US in support of Exile, and the first stateside concert since the early 1980s. So again, his reputation and momentum was starting to build really in a big way for him.
Exile was released in 1997 and it follows in the same vein as Sacrifice with an industrial feel but expanding on it further. Again self-produced, with Numan playing most instruments, it is a loose concept album again about heaven and hell, good versus bad, with sacrilegious themes and dark, ominous and claustrophobic tones. It is a strong collection of songs, but at the same time Numan did get a lot of criticism for the album due to the anti-religious themes. Sacrifice and Exile are again both a step up from his lean period as Numan continues to update his sound, and a good starting point for any new Numan fans to jump in.
This I was now angels, this is the minion day. My demons come to me. This is the minion day.
Unlike the previous two albums, Numan didn't produce Pure from 2000, Rob Holiday did, nor did Numan play all of the instruments. It does, however, follow along the same lines as Sacrifice and Exile, anthemic and menacing. However, whereas on the two previous albums you kind of knew where the songs were going within the first minute, on Pure that changes. Numan suffered some personal loss during the making of this album, and understandably that is reflected in the song titles and the lyrics. It is a personal album, and again anthemic and menacing, and again shows his disdain for organised religion. Production-wise, it is a step up from Sacrifice and Exile, and it contains some great songs, and Numan continues to adapt with the times.
If you are my shepherd, then I'm lost and no one can find me. If you are my savior, then I'm dead and no one can help me. If you...
Then in 2002, Numan enjoyed chart success once more with the single Rip, reaching number 29 on the UK singles charts, and in 2003 with the Gary Numan versus Rico single Crazier, which reached number 13 in the UK chart. Rico also worked on the remix album Hybrid, which, if you haven't got this, is just reworkings of older and new songs in sort of a more contemporary industrial style. And there were some great artists and producers on this: Curve, Flood, Andy Gray, Alan Moulder, New Disease, Sulphur. And in 2003, I think you also saw Numan performing the vocals on a track named Pray For You on the Plump DJ's album Eargasm. So again, more good stuff happening. So this just come out, being re-released on red vinyl. So if you can get a copy of this, definitely worth checking out.
We're independent from someone. This wreckage I call me. Would like to break no voice. This wreckage I call me. Would like to play you.
So now we get to March 2006. Numan's album Jagged was released. There was an album launch gig I went to actually at the Forum, and then there was a UK European tours in support of the release. And he launched a website to showcase the new album.
The sprawling and dark Jagged album from 2006 finds Gary Numan continuing with his love affair with all things gothic and industrial, and is his first collaboration and co-production with multi-instrumentalist Ade Fenton. It is also the longest break ever between albums, 6 years. Jagged is an album with a live feel, and again a continuation of the Sacrifice, Exile, Pure sound, and again lyrically the subject matter is again God and religion. Jagged has a dark, multi-layered tones and very atmospheric with moments of real beauty. However, it was criticised for so many of the songs sounding the same, with overlong intros, with many of the songs following the same formula, being overlong intros, quiet verses into a big chorus. Jagged is possibly the weakest link so far in his comeback period, but still a great album by anyone's standards. Sun Rising from 2011 was co-written and co-produced with multi-instrumentalist Ade Fenton, and Numan used a number of musicians from his live band on the recording of the album. Most of the songs on this album are outtakes from previous sessions, but they are most definitely not throwaway songs. It is a solid, big feeling album with wailing guitars and anthemic, bombastic, pulsing synths. It is very varied in terms of instrumentation, but lyrically the subject matter of religion and death is once again all present and correct. It even contains a few instrumentals this time. The album causes some division amongst Numan fans, partly due to its anti-religious overtones, but I feel it is arguably his most cohesive and consistent effort since his early 80s heyday. I think this album is so good, and if this is a reworking of discarded songs, then Gary Numan should scrabble around his vault and find some more. True, the shadow of Nine Inch Nails and Trent Reznor looms large over this album, but seeing as they borrowed from Numan in the first place, it is only right that he borrows a few ideas back. It is impressive that over 30 years into his career, Numan isn't content to just trade on former glories, and while Dead Sun Rising isn't likely to propel him back into the mainstream, not that that's what he wants anyway, it's an impressively bold affair that ensures his status remains intact.
I thought I heard someone screaming. Thought I heard someone screaming.
On 14th October 2013, Splinter, in brackets, Songs from a Broken Mind, was released. It's the first album to reach the UK top 20 in 30 years for Numan. Massive tour. I saw a show he did at the Roundhouse, which is amazing. I booked two people who used to work with me there who'd never seen him before, didn't know much about him, came away as absolute converts, as Numan continually does so well. But he toured the US, Canada, UK, Ireland, continued right from 2013 through 2014, and did another US extended tour with this album a bit later in that year. Great album musically. I think image-wise, Gary looking a bit like the Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist with the top hat and the kind of dusty Victorian look. But you know, I can forgive you for that because it's a great album.
Splinter, Songs from a Broken Mind, was released in 2013 and was again co-produced with multi-instrumentalist Ade Fenton, who also contributed keyboards, and this was Numan's highest charting album since Warriors back in 1983. The album feels like an extension from the Dark Sun Rising album, with a lot of instrumentation going on within the songs, and it feels like this is an amalgamation of all the albums from Sacrifice to Dark Sun Rising, all distilled and filtered into this one album. This album and Dead Sun Rising complement each other excellently. All lyrical elements remain the same in God and anti-religion, and choruses are big and anthemic, and it feels that for Numan the chorus is everything, and it is in equal measures dramatic, simplistic and complex. The album contains the song Lost, which Numan says is the most important song that he's ever written, which he wrote for his wife when they were both suffering from severe depression, and it was a note that he left on their dining room table for her to find. The note, the song, where he laid himself bare, saved their marriage, and for that reason he holds the song so closely. Possibly his best ballad ever, and I agree with that. It's a beautiful and gut-wrenchingly emotional song. Splinter gave Numan his best reviews and totally rejuvenated him.
That you can walk away, but when you think back to when we first met, are you sad? And when you think back to all we've been.
And on May the 6th, 2016, Numan again was one of several collaborators working with the famous Jean-Michel on the album Electronica 2, The Heart of Noise, with the track Here For You, which is co-written by Jean and Numan. On the award side, on the 10th of May 2016, I think Numan was named recipient of the 2016 Moog Innovation Award by Moog Music. And then the following year, on the 18th of May, he was given an Ivor Novello Award for Inspiration in London, you know, which is just fantastic and exactly what he quite rightly deserved, with more awards to come. In 2017, Numan released the single My Name Is Ruin, and then went on a European tour. And then the album Savage, Songs from a Broken World, was released on the 15th of September and charted at number 2 in the UK. So again, this momentum of coming back from where he was some 25 years earlier is absolutely amazing. I was fortunate. I've got an amazing wife who brought me an amazing gift of seeing Numan rehearse in a studio in London, one of only 14 people, I believe, and before he went on that tour. Absolute privilege to sit there for 4 hours watching the band rehearse. I'd say Numan is meticulous in his craft. There was a couple of tracks where the timing might have been a fraction of a second out. I didn't notice it. And instead of just going from that part, Numan was insistent they go from the whole song again. So even after doing this for, probably the best part of 40 years, he still is incredibly meticulous. And I met him, and it was a real fanboy moment for me. I think he's actually got better live as he's got older. I was gutted that I didn't go. He was playing on my birthday on 19th of November at the Albert Hall a couple of years ago, but I thought I'd seen him so many times, there'd probably other bands I could go and see, so I didn't go. Unbeknownst to me, that was the night and the tour, a few nights he did with the Scaparis Orchestra, so I was absolutely gutted I missed it. I bought the recording, and now even my 17-year-old daughter is going, "What's that? That's really cool. Oh, when he plays live next, can we go and see him?" I'm like, "Yeah, amazing." So, even my daughter is liking Numan and the stuff he's doing right now. But yeah, Splinter is a great album. Savage is a great album, as is Splinter, but this is particularly one of my favourites of his most recent work.
Savage, Songs from a Broken World, released in 2017, is his latest album to date. Stylistically, continuing along the sound started with Sacrifice, but now with an added Middle Eastern feel. It is a concept album based on a post-apocalyptic world decimated by climate change, which is a book that Numan says has been writing for a number of years, kind of a Mad Max-esque type adventure. Multi-instrumentalist Ade Fenton again co-produces, and Gary Numan's daughter Persia appears on the lead single My Name Is Ruin. All the songs are long, clocking in over 5.5 minutes each, and indeed it feels like a long album. Again, big choruses prevail, a style Numan has fallen into over the years, and an album, as you'd expect from Ade Fenton, is well produced with hooks, swirls and arpeggiated synths. The album received a great response, and it is the album that Numan said he is most proud of. The reinvention and rejuvenation of Numan is complete, and Numan is back. It is impressive to say the least, and that's what sets him apart from the old guard, new wave contemporaries, and it's all been on his own terms.
My name is Ruin, my name is Vengeance, my name is no one is calling. My name is Ruin, my name is Heartbreak, my name is Lonely, my sorrows are done.
Of course, more subliminal or subconscious tributes started coming in. So Fear Factory produced a great cover of Cars, I don't remember that, it's very sort of industrial dance version, which had Numan himself featuring on it. And then Numan started becoming acknowledged and respected by his peers with musicians such as Dave Grohl from the Nirvana and Foo Fighters, obviously Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, all proclaiming his work as an influence and recording cover versions of old Numan hits. There was that great track by Basement Jaxx, Where's Your Head At, which had samples from Pleasure Principle on there. And then 9 Inch Nails did a great cover song of a cover of the song Metal, which is one of my favourite Numan tracks. Africa Bambaataa, we did some work with him. There was just lots of stuff that was starting to come through, and then there was that big hit with the Sugar Babes with Freaks Like These, which obviously had a sample from Our Friends Electric. I remember I had the Our Friends Electric ringtone on my phone at one place I was working at, and someone said, "Oh, Andy, do you like the Sugar Babes?" I won't tell you what the response was, so it was just great that all these artists were starting to really give him the recognition that he so rightly deserved after all we'd been through previously.
As Andy mentioned, the hybrid remix LP released by Numan is excellent, giving a new contemporary spin to old Numan classics. Also, Numan has released a lot of stuff outside of his normal studio albums. Most tours have been supported by a live album, and Exile live at Shepherd's Bush and the one recently with the Scaparis Orchestra are two notable ones well worth checking out. Also, Numan has released two early versions and outtakes from songs from Replicas and The Pleasure Principle, along with added BBC Radio and John Peel sessions. These again are worth checking out and great additions to the Numan catalogue and your collection.
The alarm rang for days. You could have conversations. I was waiting by the screen. I couldn't recognize my photograph. For me, I disconnect from you. I don't like the film. I don't like the film. So play it all back. So play it all back. And I don't like the scenery. And I don't like the set. So pull it all down. I was in a car crash walking through, but I've never been quite the same. Little white lies like I was there.
So just to continue the momentum of the recognition that Numan got that he quite rightly deserved, he was the winner in 2017, the T3 Tech Legends Award. Again in that same year he received a further Ivor Novello Award, the Inspiration Award from the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors. And then last year he announced the working title of his next album, Intruder, which is due hopefully for some release sometime this year. So in summary, I absolutely love Gary. His influence, thank God he found himself after a dark period, and that, people were starting to celebrate his contribution to the music that we love. So Gary, thank God you stuck with it, buddy. So glad you didn't give up. We all love you and look forward to hearing Intruder. So that's it from me, Gary Numan. We salute you. So welcome to our Hot Stuff section, where Mark and I and various other guests we bring onto the show look at some great releases that are sort of floating around the record stores right now, that are gracing our turntables. And right now there's a ton of good stuff. I kind of really struggle to keep it to 2 albums, more for time's sake than anything else. But the 2 I selected that made the grade, one of them is by the amazing Nation of Language. This is an album I've been talking about on our Facebook channel quite a bit. It's called Introduction Presents. So there's a guy called Ian Devaney, by all accounts, a few years ago he was kind of at a crossroads. He was already in a band called the Static Jacks, who had already released 2 albums, were working on a 3rd, but then the outfit became dormant, and Devaney had to decide whether to release the new material he had or start anew. And then he got into his dad's car, and his dad put the radio on, and Electricity by O&D came on, and he had an epiphany moment. And that was the seed that sowed what this turned out to be. So over the last few years, Devaney, he's married, and his wife's also his creative partner is Aidan Noel, and she's on the synths. There's a guy called Michael Soupois on bass, and they've been reviving the 80s kind of thing with this album. Their fan base expands with each new single they release. If this album was out in the early 80s, they would be mega big. I think here, though, in 2020, they kind of introduced their new generation to the music that loads of people like me and our viewers and subscribers adored, back in the day. This 10-track album is brilliant. It's meticulously crafted and produced. And where I think Devaney's wife and Supra on the bass kind of create these widescreen melodies. Devaney has quite a foreboding gloom in his lyrics. So there's this real sort of way of capturing simultaneously hopelessness and loss with optimism and heroism, and it's brilliant. I think soon enough everyone will be listening, because these guys have unveiled an album that spans the ages. I don't think Introduction Presence is not merely reviving the music of the 80s, it reminds us that great records can offer an escape, and yet force us to contemplate our existence. In this respect, it's as transcendent as anything from artists who have topped the charts 40 years ago. This is a record we'll remember, I don't think, not just the end of this year, but for many years to come. So invest some money in this, it's a really good album. As I say, this is Nation of Language and this Introduction Presence.
Silver saints from above. Why would I say what I want? Silver saints from above. Why would I say what I want?
And the second album I want to talk about is the very listenable and enjoyable Micronaut, and the album's called Summer Games. He's a German multi-instrumentalist. He had an album out in 2016 called Forms, which was described as a true melting pot of sounds, and it caught the attention of the electronic music scene. But this year, this is an album which continues to draw on his elaborate production style, and sadly was originally supposed to be released in conjunction with the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Obviously that didn't happen, but the tracks are named after Olympic sports, so you have pole vault, archery, swimming. They're just some of the examples. There's 12 tracks in total. They're saying the reason he chose this is because apart from the competition, it's also about the movement of peace, where the focus is on the people. The composition has moved from broken bass rhythms to catchy melodies to vocal samples, guitars, and sometimes in just a few bars, making the overall experience seem like a fantastic roller coaster ride. And the ride is eclectic, but it's far from chaotic. All the way this album's compositions were very fluid. Behind that energetic flow, there's sophisticated arrangements and constructions which crush stylistic boundaries, I think, and kind of almost give birth to a new collage bass genre of music. There's bits that go with this album that are inspired by hip-hop, synth-pop, sometimes industrial dance music, but for all the commotion of this album, and it's a very positive commotion, is that the Micronaut is an avid music lover, collecting ideas and inspirations from all over the place. He's obviously got an eclectic music taste. For me, making music is always an expression and somehow also processing of experiences. So go and experience this album. I say this is Summer Games by the very clever Micronaut.
My first Hot Stuff album choice is Fine by Sono EO, his third solo album released in 2018. In our recent Electronic Cafe Alan Wilder episode, I mentioned the track Minutes by Sono EO, taken from his Red album, which Alan Wilder did a remix for. If you don't know, Sono EO is an alternative electronic solo side project of Alessandro Cortini, ex-keyboard, bass player and guitar player for Nine Inch Nails. He studied guitar at the Musicians Institute, and after graduating strayed away from the guitar and decided to focus on keyboards and synthesizers. Fine is his third and final solo album as Sono EO, and Alessandro Cortini combines the brooding intensity of Nine Inch Nails, as you'd expect, with arena-sized melodies in the vein of the latter-day sounding U2 and Depeche Mode. The sound is a dramatic hybrid and has some really great moments, and I can see why Alan Wilder chose to work with him on his previous album. Fine is well recorded and it has some wonderful analog synth sounds. I saw this album described as the 9 Inch Nails that you can take home to meet the parents, which is rather unfair I think, as it is sonically stunning and should be treated as a totally different animal, and Fine is actually more than fine. It's a stunning and worthwhile piece of art and it's worth checking out.
You cold stories
second hot stuff choice is A Broken Frame, which is the 6th studio album by Greek synth-pop duo Marshall, released in 2015, and this LP is a complete cover from start to finish of the 1982 Depeche Mode album of the same name. Their other 5 albums have all been original material, although they have covered a number of other electronic classics over the years, albeit album tracks or singles or B-sides. New Life and Get the Balance Right by Depeche Mode, Empire State Human by Human League, Regret by New Order, She's Leaving by OMD, Pure by The Lightning Seeds, Suffer the Children by Tears for Fears, Eyes Without a Face by Billy Idol have all been covered by Marshall. I guess Depeche Mode themselves would rather prefer to forget the existence of A Broken Frame, the album which Martin Gore first became primary songwriter following Vince Clarke's departure after Speak and Spell. So to think anyone would want to cover it in its entirety could have been a conversation point in itself, but Marshall have gone and done just that. Marshall bring their own twist to each song, and I feel that Marshall are one of the few consistently excellent and underrated bands who deserve much greater publicity. Depending on your viewpoint, you will either love or hate this album. It depends whether you like covers albums, and it depends whether you liked A Broken Frame in the first place. Personally speaking, I love it. Generally, I'm not a fan of covers albums, but I like this as it is a cover of the whole album and it's not too dissimilar to the original album. It's a great album, especially if you are familiar with the Depeche Mode original from 1982. It contains great versions of the Depeche Mode singles Leaving Silence, See You and The Meaning of Love, and has a great warm electronic synth sound and production, and is dancier and more contemporary and an update on the original. Marshall themselves said, "We know that it sounds strange to listen to Leaving Silence and My Secret Garden with female vocals. Even we feel surprised, but we hope that we give a whole new dimension to it, and we hope that you love it as much as we love it. Go on, give it a listen, it won't disappoint you." Interestingly, there's a note on the front of the album which says, "Please listen to the original recording by Depeche Mode before moving on to this one," which is quite a nice touch. So check it out if you haven't heard it before. It's a great album, a great update on A Broken Frame, and well worth listening to.
Without reading the text, know what comes next. Seen it before, and it's painful. Things must change. We must rearrange them. Oh, we had to estrange them.
So that's it from me and Mark in this particular episode of the Electronic Cafe. Thanks again for all the really kind words and feedback we're getting. It just motivates us to keep making this show bigger and better. And trust me, we've got something coming up very soon you will not want to miss. So, again, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. But thank you for your support, and we'll see you very soon on the Electronic Cafe. Take care.
Thanks again for watching the Electronic Cafe and for your continued support. Please send us some comments and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.